What is going on, everybody? It's your boy NeoSoulGamer here, and I am back with another video. But this time, it's not a first impressions video. I'm going to try and do something a little different because, honestly, I wanted to branch out a little bit in terms of the content that I was providing people. And hopefully this is something that can help people out, because I know that this information that I'm going to provide to you guys has really helped me out in terms of game design. So basically, what I'm going to do is give a tutorial on how to give tutorials. Yeah, you read that right. I'm going to give a tutorial on how to give tutorials. Keep in mind that I am not claiming to be an expert of any kind. I do not claim to be an expert on game design or RPGs or tutorials. All I'm doing is just sharing information with you guys that I've obtained over the years of working on my project, because I feel that that information is valuable, especially in the world of game design and especially in the world of RPG Maker games. So, what are tutorials? Without getting into the proper definition of tutorials, basically in the context of RPGs, what they are just tools that you're giving the player so that they can follow a specific set of guidelines and maximize their experience with their game. And if you don't deliver that information in a proper way, well, then you run the risk of not only frustrating the player, but getting it to the point where they just rage quit and they don't want to play anymore. So I'm going to show you guys a way to do tutorials that might actually prevent this from happening. Keyword is might. This is not a surefire way to stop people from rage quitting your game. To expect someone to simply read a tutorial and actually use all of the information you've given them about something they never understood in the first place, that's not very fair. So I feel like a better way to do tutorials is taking more of a hands-on approach and guiding the player through and putting them in positions where they have to use the mechanics that you're trying to teach them. There's a few games that do this very well, and there's a few games that don't. So, for the sake of providing an example, I'm going to freeze it right here. You may have noticed that the person playing this game has gone through what's called the classroom. And this is an area that's available very early in Final Fantasy VI. And it begs the question, why are you giving me so much access to information that I don't need? And this is a prime example. We're talking about Sprint Shoes, an item that I don't have, and True Knight, another item that I don't have. And it gives you brief descriptions of what they do, but here's the thing, why tell me about it? You're talking about an item that I don't have, you're giving me information that I don't need, and I can't even grasp the practicality of the relic that you're talking about because the battles have been incredibly easy up until this point. We haven't even had a chance to experience true difficulty where an item like this will prove useful, so why are you talking about it? We could wait for this tutorial to be introduced to us later on in the game, and that's what I find games do well, is that they wait to introduce certain mechanics and certain items to your game later on, and then teach them to you. This gives the player the opportunity to take their time and make use of the tools that you've already given them. They'll eventually start playing your game in a way that's natural to them, and that's when you want to start adding layers to your game. Now here's what I believe to be a tutorial done well. This is Tales of Vesperia, and right now you're watching a tutorial on what's called the overlimit gauge. Now keep in mind, you see that gauge that's on the left side? That gauge actually isn't available at the beginning of the game, and this particular player was 5 hours in before he even seen this. So this is another great example of how mechanics don't have to be introduced to the player right at the start, which is something I mentioned before. Now, there are a couple of reasons why I like the way this tutorial is done. For starters, look at the characters. They're still interacting, their personalities are still shining through, and there's also a little comedy thrown in there for good measure. So it keeps the player entertained, and that I find is really important for tutorials as well. Then we have the player seeing specific examples of how the gauge works, just through the natural progression of the tutorial scene. There's very few pop-up notifications, and the ones that are there, they're literally only about a sentence long. So these kind of pop-ups can break immersion, but they're so minor that it's easy to stay on track. Now I'm going to freeze it right here. This is another pop-up notification, but it's telling the player how to use this new battle mechanic in real time. The game refuses to let the player proceed until they actually do what the tutorial is trying to teach them. Then, you're given the chance to actually practice and beat up on some extremely weak enemies with a lot of HP. The best thing about all of this to me is that it all ties into character development and the overall story. It's not just a tutorial. Now I'm going to show you an example of my personal favorite kind of tutorials. The ones where you don't actually know you're going through a tutorial. Super Mario RPG actually did a decent job of this at the beginning of the game. When Mario falls down the green pipe, you can see Toad entering the house, and then Mario's actually hanging on the wall. Watch what happens next. Now you're probably thinking, big deal, he jumped. But here's why I call this a tutorial, even though nothing actually showed up on the screen. When Mario's hanging on the wall, you literally can't move. Nothing works. You can't access the menu, you can't access the directional keys, you can't move around, you can't do anything else. The only thing that works is the jump button. And you're not going anywhere until you figure that out. This is one of those great moments where the game teaches you something and you don't even know it. These are the best kind of tutorials in my eyes, because you're letting the player figure out the game for themselves and guiding them, again, as I mentioned earlier, guiding them along to make sure that they're using the mechanics properly. So that's all I have, guys. If you have examples of tutorials that you liked, please share them in the comments below. And hopefully this tutorial was informative enough to help you create what you feel is a better tutorial in your game. Like I said before, I'm no expert. All I'm doing is sharing my experiences based on the feedback I've received and the research that I've done. If that helps you guys, great. If it doesn't, no big deal. But if it did help, please let me know, because while I enjoy doing these kinds of videos, it's motivating to know that people actually find them useful. So thanks for watching, guys. Have a good one.